It was daybreak when Dr. Jeffries made the trek up the mountain to reach the catacombs. He was accompanied by his intrepid wife, Leslie, also a doctor, and a particularly enthusiastic student of theirs named Glenn, whose parents had enough money to finance his participation on this dubious expedition. The trio took 3 weeks to make it to where they were, fording rivers, chopping through undergrowth with machetes, battling hordes of ants in a crazed attempt to locate this purportedly unexplored tomb near the small fishing village of Huitzilopochtli. The locals confirmed Dr. Jeffries' information with some difficulty due to the indigenous people's strange dialect. They knew fully where it was, but none dared go there for fear of their prehistoric ancestors' retribution. Dr. J was strongly urged not to travel there lightly, for the extended journey through the rainforest and up the mountain would prove to be extremely perilous. None of the villagers could be bribed into acting as a guide. They insisted it was a foolhardy venture, and maybe it was in retrospect, but the desire to explore territory virtually unknown to Western civilization prevailed in the end. On the third day, Glenn slipped down a steep drop overlooking a hillside obscured entirely by creeping vegetation and got really scraped up. He busted his front incisor on a river rock, got a big gash in his leg that was almost positively going to get infected. For the rest of the day, he was limping and complaining excessively, wearing on everybody else's nerves in the meantime. Somehow, Glenn was shocked that he could not get service on his phone. He wore Dr. Jeffrey and his wife down enough to convince them to give up for the day and set up tent early. So, Dr. Jeffries cut holes in Glenn's mosquito netting while he slept. The good doctor was funny like that, rather childish for such a man of high esteem, a Harvard graduate, professor of archaeology at Temple for 12 years. He could never seem to land that Harvard gig. It really bothered him while he would lie awake at night fighting for sleep, a losing battle more often than not. He'd lie there while his wife slept forever soundly behind him, or beside him. Dr. J was unable to father children with her. His exploratory activities were merely something he needed to fill the gaping void that existed in his life, looming over him. The next morning, they embarked up the mountainside. It was not easy, but then again, few things in life worth doing are. La Tumba del Mar Oscuridad was the name of the place, the Tomb of Evil Darkness, its original name lost with the fading sands of time. It was carved deep into the mountain many thousands of years ago, long before the Mayan civilization was even established. You know, I read this religious paper that said it is thought that it's the burial site of their great shamans and wizards. Religious figures from a cult of some nature, said Glenn, clambering over a rocky edifice with his backpack weighing heavily upon him.
There are numerous theories on the subject, though some doubt is cast as to whether anyone was even buried up there,
said Dr. Jeffries,
as it may have simply been a sacrificial location or a monastery for aesthetes. Its remoteness has proved to be a significant problem.
They came upon the remains of someone else who had tried to investigate what was out there. The skeleton was crushed under a huge boulder, its upper torso jutting out from underneath. Tatters of weather-beaten clothes still stuck to its rib cage in parts.
It must have been an avalanche,
suggested Leslie, snapping a quick picture of it with her phone, and then her digital camera. They quickly pressed past it, trying not to think of how it could just as easily have been them in the near future, rotting away, forgotten forever to the world that formerly knew them. The sun came out from between the cloud cover and baked the rocks they were climbing until the air surrounding them began to waver. Luckily, they all wore gloves, but could still feel the heat seeping through them. By mid-afternoon, they reached the precipice whereupon their destination was situated in its obscurity. There was a great hole cut into it. However, it did not appear to be much different from a cave.
I guess this is it,
said Dr. J.
Are you sure it doesn't look like anything?
added Glenn, scratching his greasy hair as he looked from side to side. He was obviously frustrated. He had assumed it would be a lot more impressive than this.
Maybe there'll be something juicy inside. Now, listen up, Glenn. We have to be sure that we don't disturb whatever it is that we happen to find in there. You're smart and all, but you're way too clumsy,
Yeah,
said Leslie.
don't go fucking up our shit. Watch every step that you take. We don't need you crushing a 3,000-year-old urn under your Timberlands.
I know, I get it,
You'd better get it.
She threatened. The group unpacked their gear and readied themselves for their anthropological endeavor. Dr. Jeffries lit up a cigarette and smoked it anxiously, pacing about while he wrote down some notes in a logbook with yellowing page curling at its corners.
I thought you quit,
Said Glenn.
Well, for the most part, I have. Sometimes I just need one. Don't you be giving me any crap about it either. I know you smoked a joint in the bathroom back at the hotel. What did you think I wouldn't notice? All right, old man, give it a rest. You'll end up having another heart attack,
said Glenn, obviously changing through dialects as I try to figure out what his voice is. He caused Leslie to elicit a laugh that was quickly stifled. The good doctor's feelings were quite easily hurt. He needed to be treated with kid gloves or else he might forget himself. Dr. Jeffries finished his cigarette in a hurry and tossed it away to the side.
Come on, let's go while the getting's good.
They switched on their flashlights and lanterns and went into the gaping maw of darkness before them. Beams of light crisscrossed between one another and illuminated the smooth walls and ceiling that stretched on into total blackness. Oddly, there was no evidence of animal habitation. There was no sea of confused fluttering bats to navigate through, probably getting bit and catching rabies in the process. There weren't any droppings, nor were there any insects despite the prodigious population that existed on the outside, buzzing around, annoying everyone all day and night. It was suspiciously still as they entered. There weren't even any cobwebs hanging lonesomely in the corners.
Well, this place seems to be a whole lot of nothing, commented Glenn.
Shut up.
Replied Leslie, examining the walls for any signs of paint or indentations. The tunnel kept going on for many hundreds of yards, sometimes coming to an intersection here and there. The paths led from left to right to go on for a while until they would finally reach a dead end. There was no treasure, no nothing so far. Leslie was diligently constructing a map in her journal as they went.
This labyrinth is not a natural geological formation,
She stated.
It may have been the target of robbers in the past. Nevertheless, there is likely to be something that they missed.
The group stopped for a break at 7 p.m. for a king's feast of MREs, chicken cutlet with mashed potatoes, minestrone soup in an envelope, and lemon poppy seed cake that tasted a bit funny when you'd first bite into it. Little did they know that they had stumbled upon the realm of the being that some long ago knew as the Dark God, a manifestation of corruption that has lurked within the swallowing gullet of the darkness since the very dawn of time itself. Somewhere deep within the earth, there it was, stalking amongst the shadows, waiting for its next meal, tireless, everlasting, hungry from the distinctive lack of offerings, the sacrificial lambs that at one point kept the evil satiated. The hair on the back of Dr. Jeffries' neck suddenly stood straight up. Something's wrong here, he thought, continuing on, suspiciously looking over at his wife. She looked back at him, and the good doctor could tell at once that she was possessed with that same feeling of dread that he had, like there was something there watching them that they couldn't see. Glenn appeared to be oblivious, although he usually was for the most part. He was probably stoned. Their ears attenuated to nothing except their own breathing and the echo coming from their footsteps. Footsteps that kicked a millennia of dust and dirt into the air, causing Glenn to break out into a fit of violent sneezing. He always did have bad allergies. They came to the end of their next path. A simple stone altar stood there under a thick covering of ultrafine dust.
Look at that!
exclaimed Leslie, increasing her pace somewhat, eagerly pointing her flashlight at it. Dr. Jeffries discovered a trap door that was set in a large ceramic tile a few paces before the altar. He tested it with his foot and it gave way, flipping open from the middle and scattering small rocks in what could have been a bottomless pit that went straight to hell for all he knew.
You see that? We'd best be as careful as we can manage. Whoever it was that constructed this must not have wanted anyone to venture too far in, said Dr. J. Were they trying to keep people out? On the other hand, were they trying to protect them from something? The Minotaur of Crete was imprisoned in a labyrinth that must have been quite similar to this one, thought the doctor. After they carefully crossed it, Glenn stood at the edge of the pitfall and pissed into the unending oblivion, chuckling to himself as he did so. Where do you think it goes? It goes down, Glenn. That's where, replied Dr. Jeffries with a slight look of annoyance. Leslie was already at the face of the stone altar, one just big enough to accommodate someone up to 6 feet in height. She had a small brush in her hand, and she was carefully clearing away the many layers of age that were beset upon it.
I think that there's pictograms on this thing,
she muttered, continuing with her painstaking work. Can you make anything from it? Asked Dr. J, lighting up another cigarette, not caring what anybody thought of him for doing so.
Not yet. Hold on. Don't rush me,
said Leslie.
There's no way I'm figuring out this shit. It's not in any language I've ever documented. The pictures on here are so abstract. All I can make out is some sort of procession. It looks like it might be a depiction of an offer to the sun and the heavens. A mist was gathering at the base of their feet. They were unbeknownst to its presence as it collected on the warm floor, forming layers upon itself as it rose up. Glenn wandered away from them on his own little search. Come on, he thought. There's got to be something here worth finding in this desolate shithole. Looked around waywardly and stepped on another trapped plate. A monstrous slab of stone fell behind him, trapping them inside. He should have been more careful of where he was going. It was quite possible that he had doomed them all in his erroneousness. Glenn, you fucking asshole! Yelled Dr. J, throwing his hands up in the air. Now we'll have to spend all goddamn day desecrating a national treasure, he said, chipping away at it with his hammer quickly. Well, suggested Glenn, maybe there's another way out, smiling ever so innocently. I didn't see any fucking back entrances on the way up. You think this place has a fire exit? Is that it? I don't know. What would I tell your parents if you fell into some bottomless pit because you were fumbling around like an idiot in the dark, huh? Glenn smiled and said, No worries. I ought to kick your ass for saying that. You should kiss it instead, Doc. The both of you, shut up before you kill each other,
interjected Leslie, ever the mediator. Glenn's ears perked up. Hey, did anyone hear that?
My brain is still ringing from listening to you two yell at each other. Jesus Christ,
said Leslie disparagingly. Glenn slowly walked down the left path in an attempt to discern where it was coming from. He thought it sounded like a very low hum. I don't hear anything, said Dr. J. You're half deaf as it is, replied Glenn. It sounds like high tension.
It sounds like high tension wires.
Sounds like high tension wires or one of their power stations, I think. Seems like it's getting louder.
As Glenn walked further away, the reverberations of his voice began to increasingly trail off.
What are you doing, Glenn?
Hollered Leslie into the gloom with cupped hands. The glow of his flashlight became indistinct until it finally disappeared altogether.
I could use some time away from that little bastard. I hope he gets lost,
said the good doctor. It was an arduous task, hacking at the door which held them. He was at it for some time, and then he took turns with his wife. She finally heard the sound too, and it gave her a sudden pang of uneasiness.
You hear it now, Bill?
I think so. It's probably seismic activity.
Yeah, I guess.
I wouldn't be surprised if this whole place collapsed on us right now, just like that. 3,000 years old, and it would wait until today for our arrival just so that it could cave right into our skulls while I'm busting through this door. It'd be just my luck.
Don't you jinx us,
said Leslie, wiping bits of dust from her brow. Soon they'd done enough damage to the door that a small opening began to show. The mist visibly began to pass through, and Leslie took notice.
Where the hell do you think this mist is coming from?
She asked, staring as it escaped, some of it gaseous, rising in the air and disappearing, some of it joining what was already at the floor, rolling around like the vapors of dry ice.
I have no idea. Spores, perhaps?
45 minutes. The Jeffreys had cleared the way through. It had been hours, and Glenn never returned. The good doctor became impatient and paced around, smoking like a chimney.
This goddamn tube is getting to me. If Glenn isn't back in a half an hour, I say we leave him here.
My husband, the dick. You can always count on him to be one. Why don't you try looking for him?
Why don't you? I'm getting claustrophobic from being in here for so long.
Maybe I will if you don't have the balls to.
Oh, fuck you, Leslie. Don't give me that shit. I'm tired, you're tired. We can look for him in the morning.
You're the one who had said you'd hope he'd get lost.
Leslie, so help me God, I'm this close to losing it with you.
I wonder
what he would think if he found out I slept with Glenn when we first got to Mexico. He'd absolutely lose his mind,
thought Leslie, biting her lower lip.
I'm just gonna head down there a ways. I shouldn't be longer than half an hour tops. You're the man. You should be the one volunteering to do this, not your friggin' wife.
She continued speaking as she walked away down the path, but the good doctor had long since stopped listening.
Lousy bitch,
he thought, spitting in the dust while sneering contemptuously. The doc stood there, staring at his wife's ass as it disappeared from his field of vision. Then he went back to demolishing the door, moving rubble away from the entrance occasionally. Bang! Bang! Went the hammer. Now it was clear enough for him to crawl through on his hands and knees. Screw her, he thought, intending to navigate his way back outside.
I could barely even breathe in here.
Dr. J coughed and sullenly got down on his knees to crawl on through. He hit his head on a hanging fragment of the barricade in his effort.
Ow!
He yelled as he gashed the back of his crown. Stars lit like flashbulbs behind his bloodshot eyes. He was temporarily blinded as his head popped through the other side. The temperature there was noticeably lessened. Lost my place. Bear with me here. How did this here happen? Okay. Temperature there was notably lessened. It felt like a deep freezer. What the hell? Thought the doctor, trying to regain his faculties. His breath fogged up instantly.
It's 85 degrees outside. How is this possible?
He didn't have time to contemplate it much as the icy fingers of an unknown evil gripped his neck from behind. Dr. Jeffrey saw it out of the corner of his field of vision and shone his lantern on it. But the thing was, he could not be certain. It was a vaguely humanoid figure, decaying and desiccated, wearing a hammered gold breastplate, bracelets, earrings, and a white gold circlet set with fiery precious gems that almost gleamed as brightly as the thing's unnaturally violet eyes that brimmed with an unimaginable avarice. A mummy, thought Dr. J, as his head was torn from his body and thrown against the wall, leaving a streaked bloody stain where it hit. The creature pulled the good doctor's corpse out the hole and crawled through it after the two remaining intruders on its dominion. Leslie crept down the hallways, hoping she would find some signs of Glenn, aside from the dusty footprints he left behind in his wake.
Glenn!
She called.
Are you there? You okay? Hello?
All she heard was the human and the sound of her own voice, her labored breathing.
Are you alive?
She resounded, becoming ever more doubtful that would be the case. Then, when she thought that all hope was lost, she saw him. He was shuffling through the blackness without his flashlight and lantern. He didn't flinch or even blink when the bright halogen beam struck him.
Glenn, where have you been? We were so worried about you. Well, me more than Bill, but you get the idea.
She ran up to give him a hug, however, something was obviously wrong with him. He was no longer himself and made no effort to respond to her. His head was held low. His chin was digging into the concave of his chest. Something's not right here.
Glenn?
He was continually unresponsive and moved forward, dragging his feet with each labored step. Leslie grabbed him by the shoulders and shook him. His head dropped back, drooped back. Leslie gasped in utter horror as she saw his face, cold and white, pale as a dead man except for the pallor of mostly dried blood that had run down his cheeks in tears from where his eyes used to be. She jumped backward, clutching her chest, screaming unintelligibly.
Oh, God, what happened to you?
Leslie spun around and ran back toward her husband. Fat lot of good that would do. He was never the sort of man that was able to handle crises when they arose. The ground beneath her started to shake and quake and crumble away. As she looked over her shoulder, she saw what had been Glenn at one point plummet unawares into the crushing oblivion of darkness. Her pace became a strident gallop in her mad rush through the catacombs, chest seizing, eyes tearing.
Run, Leslie, you have to get out, run!
She was growing closer to the exit with each passing second. She had a misstep, twisting her left ankle. A bolt of pain shot up her leg. She went around a widening bend and slammed straight into something. An icy chill spread through her, freezing all the way to the bone. At first glance, she thought she had run into a statue. It was so dry and cold and unyielding. Those malicious, violent eyes met her, and it occurred that she may simply die right there of fright. A withered claw grabbed her up by the waist. "No!" she screamed, bashing the thing in its skull with her flashlight, collapsing a hole inside the cranial cavity about the size of a gumball. She bashed it again and again, crumpling its head like an aluminum beer can. The floor was still falling away from behind. "Better move now. You might not get another chance." Adrenaline and tenacity pulled her free from the mummy's grasp, so she slipped nimbly around its side. The floor beneath the monster fell, and it caught Leslie's boot in its talons. Leslie, about to drop to her final resting place, pulled at the knot on her laces until the boot loosened, and she was released with the demon to the total embrace of the shadows. Leslie regained her balance and took off out of there, crawling through the hole in the door and past the decapitated remnants of her late husband. She felt no strong feelings of grief for his passing. As she made it out, she welcomed the warm, humid air as it rushed into her lungs. Leslie was practically halfway down the mountain when she saw the entrance as it collapsed into ruins. The sun was beginning to rise, and she was glad to still be alive. 1 year later. The experience in Mexico had been traumatic. There were a lot of questions for Leslie Jeffries when she returned to the States. It was thought that she killed both her husband for a substantial life insurance policy, and Glenn was just collateral damage. At the end of her trial, the jury didn't think there was enough evidence to convict her, so she was released, but it turned out that Dr. Jeffries put the policy in his brother's name. Her career in shambles, her name synonymous with treachery, Leslie Jeffries descended into obscurity, obtaining a minimum wage job at a department store. She found a new man, though, and they moved in together, leasing a small one-bedroom apartment. One Friday night, Leslie went with her new man, Jim, to Walmart to purchase some cheap groceries and useless, tacky sundries that would probably never get used and wind up in the back of the closet only to be brought out and sold at a future yard sale. Jim grabbed the cart and they both went in, wading through a sea of sweaty, overweight people on scooters and speed freaks buying up materials for their shake-and-bake meth cooks.
I hate coming here,
said Leslie, frowning.
Yeah, Mom, what are you gonna do?
They plodded through the aisles. Leslie stopped to examine some yoga pants on sale.
You can see right through these things. How the hell am I supposed to go out in public wearing these?
She held up the pants to show Jim, who was obviously disinterested as a man can be, standing around waiting for his woman to just pick something so we can go home and get drunk. Shrugging, she put the yoga pants back on the rack. Then she thought she saw something very strange on the other side of the display. It was a foot trailing a frayed shred of bandage, dragging on the white linoleum. Maybe it's a diabetic. If only she was so lucky. A sickening groan rumbled from mere feet away. Leslie's heart jumped. It sounded all too familiar to her.
Let's go, Jim. Suddenly I don't feel so well.
Alright, babe, let me go to automotive and grab some 10W40 motor oil first.
The cart rolled away from them, seemingly all on its own. Jim went to grab it, but something else grabbed him. "Ah!" he shrieked. Cold talons had him in a death grip. He was instantly pulled through the display, toppling over pants and nighties and empty clothes hangers at Leslie's feet.
It's back! It found me!
I've been searching for you, Doctor, it said, no worse for wear, aside from the caved-in skull that made its circlet crown fit irregularly. The myriad of shoppers clogging up the store stood aghast at what was before them. Some took out their phones and took photos or recorded videos.
No one is gonna believe this!
Someone said, getting a good shot as the undead monstrosity crushed Jim's bicep like a paper cup and threw him clear across the store to the pharmacy section. It stepped before Leslie, all in its shining armor and bandages and finery, and held out a withered palm.
Come with me.
It was not an option. Instead, she rammed the mummy with all her weight behind the shopping cart. It folded and fell into the basket, exactly the opposite of what her intentions were, causing the cart to topple over with the mummy. She turned to run, but then it grabbed her by the ankle.
No!
She exulted, kicking the abomination and scratching at it with every ounce of strength left in her body. It was no use, though. Despite all the people surrounding them, no one came to her aid as the mummy dragged her out of the store, through the parking lot, all the way back from whence it came. Ugh. How about that?
Hey, I got something to say, you know. What do you think this is all about? You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
Prescription for acid. Another delusion and boundary reality you're living in right now. LSD. Overdose. 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 OD. Overdose. LD50.